Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared create collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. Well, welcome to Face, and we've got another exciting guest here with us today, Julia Moulden. Julia, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I've got lots to say about Julia, but I think I'm going to let her do it for herself. But I will give you this much information. It's juliamoulden.com, and her last name is moulden.com. Her website says, this is what it says anyway, she writes books, she gives talks, she produces content, she makes news, oh, wait for it, and is within reach. And is within reach. I want to get to that in a couple of minutes. But she's a storyteller, she's a public speaker. I've seen her live, and she's a writer. And I've read one of her books, We Are the New Radicals, which I'm suggesting you all run out and buy after this podcast. So, Julia, why don't we get right into it? Tell us a little bit about I don't know, being. Well, I know that one of the other titles of one of your books is Ripe. Tell us about what it means to be a radical, or it means to be ripe. About the whole idea around social change.
Yeah, well, that was quite an intro, David. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And I bet I was understating, too. That's the thing.
Well, I have to say that the line you read is the nav bar from my site.
That's right.
And I can't believe that nobody's done that. I hit on that idea, and of course, I bet you now it's going to be, people are going to copy it. But
that's right. It's going to go viral. Yeah.
It's just so obvious to tell a story with the nav bar. Why do we have to make it the way it's been for so long? Which is, anyway, you know, everybody knows what nav bars do. So here I am at the ripe age of 57, and I'm a new radical, and I'm what I call ripe, which is people who've discovered that life doesn't end at 50. In fact,
right.
Just the opposite, that it goes on. And as I've said for years, and really truly believe that our greatest work happens after that milestone birthday. And for some reason that's gotten lost in our culture, and we have this huge opportunity now, because so many of us are going to live much longer and in reasonably good health, to achieve things that we couldn't do. And I would add, because I think this is an important point for your audience, that, you know, if there were ever a time that the world needed all hands on deck, this is it.
Wow, that's so great. Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. You don't have to be a deep thinker to sort of get a sense for that, do you?
Well, I mean, we just know that people who've lived life and have seen so much and have, you know, knowledge, skills, and resources need to be part of the conversation about how we get ourselves out of this mess and how we really save not just the planet, but the future of humanity.
So you just mentioned we need to be a part of the conversation. I find myself saying that a lot. You know, as a philosopher, a guy who loves ideas. I mean, I like to sit around with a bottle of wine and a you know, couple French cigarettes and talk about life.
All right.
You know, and hey, it's all about the dialogue and it's all about the conversation. But you write about the action as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
Well, it seems so critical to me that people, yes, have an outlet for what they're thinking about and feeling, and their desires and their hopes. And as you know, the books that I've written, the last two books, have been about finding that place through what we do for a living, because I realized that people increasingly didn't want to lead bifurcated lives. You know, I do this thing for a living, and then I do the Run for the Cure once a year, or whatever it might be. That they wanted to integrate that making a difference and that meaning into their work. And when I first started talking about the New Radicals, people thought I had rose-colored glasses, I
Right,
think.
right, yeah, sure.
Sure, some people,
Yeah.
you can go off and work for, Doctors Without Borders or whoever it might be. But, of course, the world has changed, even though in the last decade we've gone through this terrible economic upheaval, so much that Gallup reports that meaning is the number one thing that people look for in their work.
Wow.
So, yeah, the world's changed. People want that now.
Do you have a sense that the younger generation, what is it, the millennials?
The millennials.
Is the M, does it stand for meaning?
Interesting. I haven't heard that. That's good. Well, it's certainly true. I mean, it seems to be strongest among the boomer cohort and the millennial cohort.
Okay.
They've emerged into a world that I haven't quite articulated this, so I'm just going to sort of throw it out. Which we boomers came of age in a world where we had all kinds of opportunity. We could take risks, therefore, and I think the same thing is true for the millennials, although they don't all see it this way yet.
Right.
They just see the stuff that gets, I'm not getting a job, I've gone, this big education, blah, blah, blah. But I think it will lead to an ability in them to be creative and innovative in a way that's really going to stand them in good stead for the next, century. So I think it'll be to their advantage in a way that they can't yet see.
Right.
And certainly this notion of meaning is deeply embedded in them because they know that the world really doesn't need more consumers.
Yeah.
It needs people who can do something.
Yeah, well things are broken, right?
Right, exactly.
We're not going to just continue to sweep that under the carpet.
Right. Yeah, well, the world won't allow us, and if this winter didn't convince people of that, or the summer they've just had in Australia, something's going on.
Tell me about your family dinner table. So I'm going to just go a little lazy on my listeners again and read a little bit off your website, if that's okay. To quote Julia, I think, I trace my entire career to our family's dinner table. Mahogany, yellow walls, my mother's tea biscuits, and talk. Stories, ideas. What is badinage? Badinage, laughter, and singing. I mean, that's awesome.
Badinage.
Thank you.
You have to say it avec un accent.
There you go. So
badinage is wordplay. So
wordplay. Excellent.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
So, but story, obviously, and we're back to conversation, we're back to dialogue, we're back to, connecting with others, and it sounds pretty amazing that you were able to connect like that in such an intimate way with your family. You must have felt incredibly included.
Yeah, it was a remarkable place to start. I mean, both my parents, my mother's still alive, my father's now gone, are curious people, always wanting to know, what does that mean? And, we had a dictionary and an encyclopedia, the days pre-Google,
right.
Close at hand, and there were all of these conversations about, well, what does that mean, and what did you learn, and what did you see, and my question always was why? So, I mean, it's a chicken and egg thing, isn't it? I mean, I think it was in my nature, and it was definitely encouraged in my family to be somebody who is a seeker and who does want to, be in dialogue with people about how they're leading their lives. And then that leads me to wanting to share those stories with other people.
The more books that I read, the more films I see. We have Elizabeth and I have Spencer, who's 8, and Victoria, who's 6.
Yeah.
The story, just the power of narrative, the reconciliatory nature of it.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of research on it. I haven't read a lot of books on it, but it just seems to me that there's, I was talking to Victoria, who's 6, just the other day, about kind of small t and capital T truth, and this idea that the story may not actually be true, but there's all kinds of truth in it. And I'm pretty sure she got it, and I know Spencer has, and it's always so fun as a vain parent to hear your kids kind of spouting things that you've said before that you think are really wise, right? Oh, good, Spencer, he got it. Yeah, that's awesome. He's going to be okay after all.
Right.
But I think, I don't know. I don't know if we're moving more towards that or if we're moving away from it. But what do you think? I mean, you've made a living at telling stories, but you were raised telling stories as well. So it's been an incredible part of your life. How do we make that a part of our lives more?
Well, I think, to the first part of your question, it's not going to go away. In fact, the opposite. Stories are, for me, I love this idea that they're equipment for living.
Right.
That they serve a purpose. I mean, yes, they can be escape, but the best ones are sharing the way people have gotten through this tricky, complicated, confusing, painful, sometimes joyful thing we call life. And so I think there's no diminished appetite for it. I think it'll probably continue to take new forms, and I think that's going to be really exciting to watch, what the next kind of media are going to be. But it's something that every marketer learns, or every speechwriter. I mean, you don't impress people by sharing the facts, or that's part of it, but really what they're going to remember is the story. That's what's going to resonate with them, and that's what they're going to carry out of the room with them, not what the square footage was.
Right.
So it's certainly a fundamental part of our culture, and is just going to get stronger.
What do you think about the healing power of story? This whole idea of reconciliation, I used the word inclusion earlier, and I think a lot of us feel excluded. I've had a second attempt at a marriage, and I'm in a wonderful relationship with Elizabeth. And my first attempt, I don't think I was embraced. I don't think I felt included in the way that I do in this relationship. And I think in some ways, a lot of what we do and what we don't do is as a result of, not being included. And so, whatever you want to, call crime, you could call, any number of sort of dysfunction, I suppose, or any level of dysfunction in our society, I think comes down to, simply in some cases not being affirmed, not being loved, not being, included. And so how do you think story can sort of peel back those layers a little bit and connect us with us, build trust, all these things? I mean, I think there's something there to that. And even these crazy stories that you read children, that we read at night, there's wonderful truths that you can pull out. And I kind of wonder about that.
Well, absolutely. And it's something that that I remember first emerging in our culture. There aren't women in the media, there aren't women in movies, there aren't strong female leads. If I were black, I'd probably be talking about my memories of that, when there weren't any black faces anywhere, much less in the president's office in the U.S. And so there's that piece of inclusive,ness that I think, I was just thinking about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Remember that movie?
Yes, yep.
Yeah, and how powerful that was for a lot of people, how shifting in our perceptions of what, these other human beings were like. So I think stories at every level, in all ways that we think of them today, have that ability to make us feel like we're part of the conversation, to go back to that idea. And I mean, social media has given us such an opportunity to tell our stories and to share them with people in a way that I think hasn't happened ever before on this scale, but is returning us in a way to the way, I mean, Facebook could be thought of as the fire, what is it? The campfire, so people are gathering around it.
Right, sure, yep.
I'd rather see people face to face.
Yes, of course, yep.
And I think that will shift too, but I think, that's the need that it's answering. I want to tell my story. More people are writing today and communicating and making videos than ever before.
I met, and this is a little bit of a pet project. I'm a frustrated filmmaker, so I want to do a documentary on a man that I met 10 years ago in Cambodia at a Siem Reap War Museum. 10 years later, in May of 2013, I decide I'm there in the same part of the country. I decide, you know what, wouldn't it be amazing if he was still there? I'm gonna drop in and see. Highly unlikely. Anyway, he is. Totally doesn't remember me, but I remembered a story that he told me back in 2003, where we sat in the area, where in the museum. It's an outdoor museum, and so I went up to this guy whose name I didn't remember, and I walked up to him. He's sitting there smoking a cigarette and drinking a beer with a guy at the little patio outside of the museum, and I said, "You don't remember who I am, but I remember you. We sat over there 10 years ago, and you told me this story." And I unpacked it, and you should have seen this face, this smile appear in his face.
Yeah.
And later, as I've gotten to know him now more, came back in November, we actually did do some filming. Every day, Julia, he has been coming to this museum. Basically, his life is to tell his story. He wants people to hear how he fought for the Khmer Rouge, how he fought for the Cambodians, how he wound up in a North Vietnamese prison, etc., how he lost his leg to a landmine. And he's in tears half of the time, this guy. Yeah. He's probably in his early 50s, Cambodian man, and it blows me away that's his reason for existing, is to tell a story.
Yeah. Well, and it's something, I have to say, that I hear a lot, that people say to me, I have this amazing life story and I want to share it with you. And, it's, I think, universal. And what came up for me as you were telling that story is how we still don't hear the stories of people beyond the kind of, when I talked about the hot summer, I mentioned Australia because that's what we hear about in the newspapers, in our media. We don't really hear about what's going on in Cambodia. So we need to hear those stories, but how life-affirming it is for him that you have this interest.
Right. Yeah,
I love to make that film.
Well, believe me, I'm working on it. We've got some footage, and it's started. So we'll see how it plays out. But I loved, sometimes we don't hear. I almost thought you were going to end it there. I sort of thought you were going to go down. We need to listen more.
Yeah.
And I think I've noticed with my kids, that's huge, and that's hard for somebody like me, who clearly has ADD, who's got his hands into a lot of different projects, who's doing a lot of different things and trying to change the world and all those. Well, how do you find time to listen to your kids? But it's just so important.
It is. Well, to everybody. I mean, I think it's one thing that I really try hard to do, and I do talk about the whole New Radicals credo, positive, constructive, hopeful. And, when I give a talk, I try to share with people, okay, well, here's what it means. When you interact with somebody at who's just pumping your gas or whatever it might be, and most people just ignore them. They're just a human being, or barely. But to elicit, more than just how are you or how, so that the people that are really good at this are, like the Bill Clintons. I don't know why I'm using all these American examples. I'm Canadian.
That's
but,
right.
Where he really engages, and he is so focused on you when you're talking to him, and he will remember these extraordinary details about your life the next time you meet. I mean, of course, he's an exceptional human being, but we can all learn from that. And why do we respond to him? Because he is paying attention. He is listening.
We talked briefly before the tape player started for the podcast. You talked about pathfinders and masters, and I don't know if the whole notion of if Bill Clinton, if this is a nice segue into that, but this idea of this statesman being very experienced, having a lot of he's put a lot of time. He's been on deck for quite some time. Can you talk a little bit more about the distinction between those two and why you found yourself there?
Yeah, so when I started writing Ripe, I was mostly thinking about people who loved their work. We can think of artists or architects as examples, and who would want to go on doing it forever and ever. And then I started thinking about how in our culture in the West, we're really focused on this idea of reinvention, that we're going to go off and do something completely different. So I realized that I was going to write about what I call pathfinders, so people who do change careers completely. But then I realized there's another whole group of people that are masters, so those artists or architects, but who aren't artists or architects, who may be doing a job that's very low profile or not one that's on most people's radar, but is a job that they've enjoyed and that they want to continue doing, and what they need to do if they are in that of that mind, they want to continue doing it, is to find something that they can feel passionate about again, to find that, what I call the zest of the beginner, so that they can continue on. And in fact, that's what happened to me. I started out thinking that I was going to reinvent myself, and realized that no, I was going to become a master. Which was a complete surprise to me, and I couldn't have predicted it. And it's been a 10-year journey that I now describe as my hero's journey.
Right.
And I'm so glad that I did. I wouldn't have chosen this journey. It was filled with perils and lots of struggle and some extreme joy too. But now that I have realized that really I'm a storyteller, and what I want to do is continue to do that, but to just do it with this range of media now, not restrict myself solely to writing books. I'm happier doing it, much happier than I would have been if I just continued on as a speechwriter, which is what I was predominantly for the first part of my career.
Right.
And I have all of this I have this new skill set, I have this new awareness of myself, a new confidence, and a new enthusiasm. So everything is different in a way, and yet the work is fundamentally the same.
You say you wouldn't have chosen it. What do you mean by that? Because you don't strike me as a fatalist at all. You don't strike me as the type of person who's deterministic in any sense of the word. You're all about intentionality and making decisions and forward movement, being proactive.
The hero's journey is all about the inciting incident. That's how the journey begins. And just for people that aren't familiar with it, it comes from the work of Jung and Joseph Campbell, and of course a lot of people have written about it in the last 20 years.
Sure, yep.
But so the inciting incident in my case was a divorce. It was something personal, and it's often something traumatic. And what I mean by I wouldn't have chosen it is partly, I like being comfortable. I like being able to, I had a very different life 10 years ago than I have today. And initially, I resisted. I thought, well, I don't want to uproot myself, and what is all of this? But what happens on the hero's journey is that you meet a mentor or two who helps you realize, yes, you can do this. And, and then I was really seized by the idea of, I rediscovered my ambition and really took on this challenge and, explored all kinds of things in the last 10 years. So didn't choose it, but it chose me, perhaps, and I'm really glad that it's all happened.
So for somebody that, where does choice fit into somebody who I guess makes the decision, or maybe not makes a decision. Maybe it's more of a an unfolding, I suppose. I was going to say unraveling, but probably not the right word. But the difference between the pathfinder, the master, the new radical. because it does strike me that, you do have to make a series of choices in order for something like that to happen. Or are you sort of, I haven't read Ripe, or are you sort of saying to folks, just it's more about listening, it's more about conversation and inclusion and dialogue and so on?
I think the impetus comes from different sources. Sometimes it's, oh my goodness, I'm 50.
Right. We call that an inciting incident.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or I'm 50 and I didn't do what I wanted to do.
Right.
Or as I read, now I'm going to forget her name, the woman who just swam from Cuba to Miami, Diana Nyad.
Okay.
And she's 60, whatever she is, let's say 4. Just an extraordinary example. She realized when her mother died that what is my life about, and I'm not going to live forever, and what do I want to accomplish? So I think there can be, all kinds of things that set people off on this journey, internal and external. And for young people, I've had so many people at 25 saying, I think I'm having my quarter life crisis, sending me emails saying, what do I do? And the beauty of this journey is that there have been many people down the path before us. So there is a nice series of steps. There's a process, and I map it out in both my books, that requires us to assess our skills, that asks us to reflect. So that's the listening piece that you're talking about, really listen to our deeper selves and to explore.
Right.
This is sort of, very high level, to get out of that comfort zone that I was in and meet new people and push yourself and try new things and stretch and get scared and take that risk. And
you referred to being a seeker earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course that's in everybody, and so the journey will be longer or shorter. I write about one guy in the New Radicals who was 17 years before he really felt that his journey had come to an end.
Right.
And I thought, boy, I hope that's not me.
Yeah.
But I couldn't have predicted that it would take me 10. So
you really do believe in change. You really do believe in teaching old dogs new tricks.
Oh, I think it's essential.
Yeah.
I think, companies can't stay the same. They know that now, or you're just going to become outmoded, with the next technological marvel. The same thing is true for human beings. If you want to be engaged in the world, you have to be really nimble now. You have to keep, you
it's
just
good. Yeah.
do. And people... I think you're younger than me, right? Are you?
I'm 48.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I'm just a
you're
youngin'.
considerably younger than me. But so let's just say broadly, people our age also have to, unless they want to go, and live in that gated community and retire from life, which, as we know, and as I talk about in Ripe, is really not good for us. It's the quick road to into descent. What did Walter Cronkite's called? Retirement statutory senility.
That's hilarious.
Not something you want to pursue. Although it's been sold to us as this great,
yes,
that's what you want to achieve in life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on some level it's underachieving, isn't it? You can still do that, I suppose. You can still be. Can you be a ripe new radical anyway? Yeah. So you could still be a ripe new radical on the beach, in Sarasota. It seems to me it's not so much about geography. It really is about the heart and the soul and the mind, right?
Yes, and staying active and engaged. And I just think my metaphor that I use all the time is think about the natural world. Think about animals. There's not a bunch of beavers that are retired.
Right.
And that, all the other beavers are supporting them. Beavers keep working and foraging for food and build, until their time is up. And I think that's the natural state.
my message has been, for quite some time now, and I think this is part of the reason why you and I have resonated, why we connected, and I need to tell this quick story. I'll try to make it really fast because I don't want to take away from what you have to say, Julia, but I was introduced to Julia by my brother-in-law a couple Christmases ago, probably, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 Christmases ago. I was given the book We Are the New Radicals by my brother-in-law, Ted. And he used to edit 24, the magazine in Toronto. And Dave, I thought it might resonate with you and your whole So Change kind of social justice sort of thing. Well, I kind of cracked it open, not knowing what to expect, hadn't heard of you and so on. And I ate the book up, read it in under 3 days, just full of wonderful stories and engaging and empowering. I mean, it's about social justice, but it's also, what I've come to call incrementalism, which I'm sure is not my own word or phrase, but something I want to definitely explore more. This idea that, it all matters.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I should have done my research. Is it Ed Sutt? The Hurricane Nail?
The Hurricane Nail.
I was going to call him Nut. Ed Sutt, the Hurricane Nail. I mean, what a beautiful metaphor for a guy who's designed a better nail that has saved all kinds of lives and probably hundreds of millions, billions of dollars and capacity and infrastructure, and the list goes on. And it comes down to a nail.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know, talk about incrementalism.
It's wonderful.
We have this idea that we have to do it all big, grand.
We got to solve the world's problems, right?
And he watched the footage of Hurricane Katrina and was devastated, as we all were, by watching what happened. And he knew in that instant that he wanted to do something, but he didn't know what it was. That he was an engineer working at Stanley Bostitch, and just was playing around with ideas, then had a chance to go and survey some hurricane damage, and realized, with his engineer's ability to see, that in wooden structures, it wasn't the 2x4s that give way, so the wood doesn't split. It's the fasteners that hold it together that give way. So he hit on this idea of, let's make those nails stronger. And he did, and his company brought it out as a product, and, all of that from a guy whose guidance counselor told him he wasn't going to amount to much.
Which is so
Don't
great.
Listen to those people.
Yeah. Hey, I did one of those tests back in grade 11. They told me I was going to be a garbage man. So.
Well, there you go.
That's right. So how do we convince people, Julia? One of the things I don't know what the stat is these days, but a lot of young people don't vote, right? And this is something I talk about a great deal. Mm-hmm. Why is that? I don't think it's because they don't care. I mean, we talked earlier on about how millennials are looking for meaning. They do understand. Mm-hmm. So why don't they vote? Why don't, my vote matters. There's the T-shirt, right? Mm-hmm. But on some level, I don't think a lot of us believe it. And so we end up retiring to Sarasota, and we don't, take that desire with us to still make a difference, to change the world, or whatever the case might be. So I'm wondering, with all the interviews you've done and the books you've written and so on, what is it? What's missing, I guess?
Well, I think the answer lies in what we were just talking about, that idea of incrementalism, that because we do become so overwhelmed so easily. I mean, even just thinking about which cause or issue do I want to support. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. Every time you turn around, there's something else, or open the newspaper. Which I don't know how many people do, but I still do.
I still do too, actually. I really enjoy it.
Well, I have to tell you a quick story about that. I was actually in a waiting room, and there was a little kid, like pre-reading age, he was at a loss, didn't know what to do with himself, and his mother was distracted, so I handed him a piece of my newspaper, and he held it like he'd never seen a newspaper before. He didn't know you could open it up.
That's awesome.
He didn't know you
are
could
old.
Fold it.
Yeah.
I went, what is... Anyway, shocking. But that's how the world has changed.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So I always encourage people to go back to themselves, to check in with, what is most meaningful, what we value most highly. That's a clue. And to, surround yourself with people that have hope, that know that, yes, little things add up, and make a difference. And yes, your community activism pays off, and you may not see it, and it may seem hopeless, and there may be no funding, and the world seems corrupt, and all of the things that we all know.
Very cynical age in some respects, yeah.
Yeah, and so we need to keep countering that, and thank goodness there are people like you who are doing this work, David, and sharing the word about what's possible.
Yeah, thanks. I served an 8,500-hour apprenticeship as an electrician, and I know the power, I think, of little things. I know the power of coming alongside someone, learning a trade, becoming that step from apprentice to master. I wrote about it in my master's thesis. Do you find yourself mentoring others now? I mean, obviously you can sort of mentor through books and through essays and public speaking and those kinds of things, but are you finding that you are personally coming alongside others as well?
I'm not regularly asked to, so I don't know if it's just that writers are by nature more isolated, that I'm not in, bumping into people as you might in an organization. Sure. But I had one fascinating moment where, so I wrote Green is Gold, the book that was my first book, and it was published in 91 by Harper Business. And so that was a long time ago. It was the first environmental management guide for business.
Wow.
And it's way out of date now, but the principles in it still hold.
Sure.
So I was interviewing interns for RIPE after the New Radicals came out, and I put a notice on the Mars website as thinking, I'm going to pre-screen. I'm only the kind of people that would go to the Mars website. I want working for me. Anyway, long story short, one of the kids who applied had been in Abu Dhabi when she was in high school, and her teacher had told her about this book called Green is Gold.
Wow. She
read it, and then she found me through the Mars website and said, "Can I be your intern on this new book?"
Wow, that's pretty cool.
That's
an amazing story.
How does that happen?
You want to talk about, incrementalism and listening and inclusion. Wow. Yeah,
and
that's
then
very
connection.
Cool. And connection, yeah.
And so
I just got a bit of a shiver, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I really did. I mean, it was an awesome moment for her, for me, and so I would say probably interns have been the ones that I've been mentoring,
Well, and you used to be a professional coach. I mean, I guess there's a difference between, coaching someone and mentoring, but I would imagine there's some crossover.
Yeah. I've definitely worked with people one-on-one, and it's incredibly rewarding, and it's this universal need. I mean, people, I'll tell you, I've had some, between my work as a speechwriter and coaching, I've had some very big, powerful people sitting in front of me.
Right.
And everybody is scared, and everybody is uncertain, and everybody is vulnerable, and I love finding that out about human beings. I mean, they never show it.
Sure, yeah.
But it's there in all of us. So it's funny in a way, but even these powerful people are looking for mentoring too.
Well, it's like we're almost trying to find the thread, but clearly the thread to me today is conversation, dialogue, inclusion, connection. I think, aren't we all on some level just kind of looking for that?
Yeah, that's what keeps us going, I think.
I mean,
when you find it, it's wonderful.
It's wonderful. Soon Rotena is the name of the man I met 10 years ago who hangs out and lives at the War Museum. I mean, I think ultimately that's what he's looking for, I think it's connecting with others, and his message is that war is crazy, basically.
Yeah.
That's essentially his message, and how can I communicate this by, however that might be, showing people my fake limb, telling them a story. I mean, he's got this, oh man, yeah, I so hope that I get to invite you to the screening of the film one day, but it's just, delightful stuff. Well, you know what, we got to wrap up in a second, but what's next? How maybe what's next for you maybe, but also, how are we going to get everybody on deck?
Yeah,
it's a big question, eh?
And it's early days.
It is. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're thinking about these years in a different way, but the idea is starting to catch on. It's starting to spread, and so I think you're going to see a big shift in the next few years. And my next project, other than this client work that I'm doing, is I am writing a new book, and it's a departure. It's a little bit of a surprise.
Oh, good. Oh, good for you.
And so I'll make sure that you hear all about it when it comes out.
Please. Well, I follow you on Twitter, so that's I'm sure I'll hear about it that way. Can I end with a quote from We Are the New Radicals?
Love it.
Chapter 5, what does the world need? I mean, that's kind of what I asked you, I suppose. I just asked you, but you say, clearly, it's about making a difference in the world. But we need to find something that calls out to us, that captures our hearts and fires our imagination. Why? Because our enthusiasm will inspire us to take on the challenge and give us the strength to carry on in the face of inevitable difficulties, close quote. It's so great. I mean, it's just, you got to get out of bed in the morning because that's what matters.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's so trite and trivial and almost meaningless in some ways, but it's a beautiful quote. It's a great book, and you're wonderful.
You too.
Thank you for joining me today. And as I say to everybody, we'll have to do a follow-up because we barely scratched the surface. There's clearly more going on than meets the eye.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I wish you well with the new project. I'll look forward to it. Thanks so much, Julia.
Thank you, David.